complicated. 5 years ago, I was approached by a lady at a conference or a publication university event in Nashville, and she spent an inheritance to go there. She came from the UK, and because she had the idea she would meet somebody that could design a dyslexic typeface, a dyslexic-friendly typeface. And after she heard first my piece to the editors, and the day after my piece for the designers, I had to go to her and say, well, I'm good, but I'm not that good. You don't want to hear me twice. And she said, well, this was why she came. And I said, well, since I'm probably the only type designer around, I'm the one. And we start talking about this. I was myself um, um, uh, um, dyslexic when I started in school. I was tested and I was proved dyslexic. So I remember all these notions of bouncing letters and so on, and desperately trying to find alternative words when you couldn't spell the word you actually wanted to write and so on. That's maybe why a lot of dyslexic readers are very creative, because they have to have a bigger amount of words available to write what they want to do, because they need alternative words, so they cannot spell the words they really want to write. That's one thing. So we started designing these letters. We were out in British schools and tested them, and with an amazing results. I don't have time to get into all the testing we did, but we had people trying to read, 11-year-old people that well, kids that the only thing I was told when I went into the, don't ask them to read, they'll tear down the place, they'll burn it down. We'll not have a school on Monday if you do. And I did, and they read, and they got completely silent, and they started discussing why this was a better way of reading. I'll tell you what we did. So the Grace typeface is designed to try to keep letters on the baseline. When you're dyslexic, you see the letters bouncing like balloons. And if letters bounce like balloons, they are very, very difficult to get the letterscape right. You can just imagine if the lines in a Chinese sign moved all the time, then you couldn't read it, and that's basically the same thing. So we opted to uh, add a little weight in the bottom of the line of the letters. Well, others have done that before. Dyslexic typeface and open dyslexic typeface. Um, the only thing is, I will argue that nobody reads this better. Not the dyslexic people and not normal reading people. Why? Because it's impossible to create beautiful words using these typefaces. And hence, the aesthetic is so important while you read, because your brain should be relaxed and have not spend time in wondering why does it look like it does. They should just recognize the letterscapes, turn them into words, and so on and so forth. And these typefaces doesn't do that. They are very, very good samples of displaying an idea. There are very, very poor examples of type design. They are actually not type design at all. These are sketches that just show an idea. Well, a second thing we put into this, among others, I heard a radio program. There was this lady, she was face blind, so she couldn't recognize herself in mornings in the mirror. Just imagine that. That is until she put makeup on her face. When she put makeup on her face, she could recognize herself. So this interaction with her own face made her recognize herself. And I thought, what's the equivalent of putting makeup on a face? Well, when you talk typography, well, make even looking letters look more different. For instance, if you put a heavy serif in the middle of an M and in the beginning of it, then they look more different. And if you enhance this Helvetica with some open forms that make it more crunchy or more different to look at, you also differentiate the image that people try to interpret. Now, this is what you get. And everybody can see that you're not reading that display of an idea better than you're reading the original Helvetica. And it's because it's not a type design. It does exactly the same thing as the other dyslexic so-called fonts. They display an idea, but they stop short there. And we thought, well, what if you made a fully fledged type design that actually did the same thing, but had the aesthetics as an element as well? Here's the 2.0. I think we are at 2.4 now. You see the different lettering. The N and the M is different because the M has a almost McDonald's bow. I see now. The E and the F are different because the E, the middle stroke of the E doesn't connect, and so on and so forth. And then the small letters, you can see the V and the U are different because of the serif, and the V and the W are different because of a straight line and a bold line, and so all these different things create a typeface that looks different. But is it more readable, you might ask? Well, here's Helvetica, by many ranked as the most readable typeface in the world. And here's the Grace typeface. Now, your lazy brain has to adjust that the Grace typeface looks different. But most people, when they've just read a few lines or looked at letters, will experience that the letters are actually easier to read, and it looks a bit bigger somehow, the Grace typeface, than the Helvetica. And I don't know if we have any dyslexic readers in the audience, but I'm so confident now when I am out talking, I ask, is there any dyslexic around? And if there are, I ask them to come and get a book and then read a page before I enter this stage, and then to ask them, did you read a page? And if they did, they all say, well, starry-eyed, that they haven't read anything like this. And that's the only story I hear. See, that's not to say that this helps everybody. It doesn't. We rewire our brain differently, but it helps quite a big deal of the dyslexic readers. And you can see the Bibles that were published, well, a year ago in ESV and at CSB by Crossway and Likeway. They've sold more than 300,000 Bibles within a year. So it's very, very popular. And if you look at the what you see on Amazon, and that's kind of neutral, what the readers, how they have perceived the product. One of the editions have 146 reviews and 146 5 stars. So that's the sort of amount of recognition we get. But it doesn't stop here. Actually, there's a digital reading arm to it as well. What if our browser were capable of actually allowing an individual change in the letters, so that if you had trouble reading, you open your browser and you got an opportunity to give more or less makeup, more or less weight at the bottom, more or less and bigger or smaller in size, in leading, and also background color. So you that way created a personal number that could be fed into all readers. So you got your preferred reading in all digital reading. That's sort of the next step I'm on. This is for the future, but it can certainly be done. The type design is one thing, but that doesn't cover it. If it was only the type design, it would be much less effect. But we combined that with the Grace layout principles and white space again. It seems like every designer loves talking about white spaces, but there's 4 kinds of white spaces in, as we heard, that this is a piece of text, and that's totally unreadable. But we might put a little bit more space in between the letters to see whether that makes it more readable. And it sort of doesn't. And the reason it doesn't is that now you can't see the difference between the letter space and the word spacing. obviously you could do something about that as well. So you can put more space in between the letters, and that creates this result. It's still not very readable. It's because it aligns vertically instead of horizontally, so there must be a way to change that as well. We could put a little bit more space between the lines, and now we're getting somewhere. This is still much too difficult for a dyslexic reader to read because they eventually skip a line or they lose the meaning. And in this column, they had to start on top of the paragraph again, and you'll not do that twice. I mean, then you'll just skip reading. So to avoid that, we have made a rule of not more than 11 lines in a paragraph. So we impose non-existing blank lines, for instance, in Bibles. And now, if you read the first paragraph, you would read the next one, and the next one, and the next one. And should you skip a line, that's not a far distance to start from the beginning again. And well, it's the other way to just a few more um, 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 typographical advice. This is what you generally see in a book. But these lines are too long for dyslexic readers. Often a shorter line is much more readable. But here you've got the text with the adjusted right edge. And this is what happens. You have all these different word spacing, but because that's the only way you can adjust to get the straight right line. That throws off your brain. The distance between the words are just as disturbing for your reading as the long lines are. So what can you do? Well, you can adjust the lines. Now suddenly you have the same deliberate distance between the words, so it helps you read. And then, just as the other sample, we put in a few blank lines to make sure it's easy to assess the text and it's not scary to begin reading it. And if we added a colored background, it will also help because it reduces the visual stress of the high contrast between the white paper and the black letters.